I pray for Trump, DeSantis, or Pompeo will run for president in 2024 because they have a good chance on winning. And I also pray, Lord, please make this country safe to live. And I also wanted to pray for my uncle Darren Maloney's new podcast, that they will not kick him off or say mean and bullying things about him. I also pray that he will invite more guests and talk about more things, including what is up in our country and our education. I also heavily pray that Biden will not seek re-election. I also pray for our states, for our 50 states, and I especially pray for California, and I also pray for the conservatives of California. I also pray that California does not make the vaccine mandatory or mandates it in any stores. I just pray for our country and for our freedom, that California residents can make the best of it, even though Gavin Newsom is the governor. And I also pray for Florida, where Governor DeSantis is the governor, and I hope they overturn the mask mandate and not make the vaccine mandatory for any schools or businesses. In Jesus, Lord, I pray, amen.
Thank you, Aiden.
Yes.
Okay, I want to thank my nephew Aiden for the invocation. As you can see, he does not like Gavin Newsom. So welcome to High Cheese. For the past 40 or 50 years, our political and bureaucratic institutions in Washington, Wall Street executives, and large corporations have been in the process of slowly dismantling the American middle class, in particular, the working class and mid-level managers. Bad trade agreements inspired by globalism pitted the American worker, the best force in the history of mankind, against workers in foreign lands making slave wages. Meanwhile, those at the top of our institutions saw their wealth and influence increase exponentially. The social compact between corporate executives and employees were obliterated as CEOs began compensating themselves hundreds and hundreds times more than the average compensation of their employees. I'm not talking about the founders of these companies who deserve to become rich if successful. I'm talking about the class of people who are hired by these founders to run their companies. Most of those hired had no unique skill set. There were likely thousands of other individuals with similar skill sets. So what gives? They simply figured out that a "you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back" scheme worked effectively among CEOs, corporate board members, and wannabe high-level executives. One of the reasons that these corporate insiders were able to develop and get away with this scheme, as well as the outsourcing of American jobs, is the failure of those at the top of unions to put up a fight. Instead of resisting unfair trade agreements or trying to unionize workers in other countries, so to level the playing field for American workers, these self-interested union leaders became loyal to the self-ordained elite class who headed these aforementioned institutions. Meanwhile, mid-level corporate managers were compensated just enough to keep their loyalties to corporations and the corrupt institutions that were flourishing. But the joke was on these mid-level workers, as the elite viewed them as nothing more than the working class, with a white collar and tie. So what then happened after these well-paying jobs were outsourced to foreign lands? Well, as you can imagine, small cities and towns were decimated. Jobs that provided couples with the ability to raise families on one income simply vanished. Bad things happened. Foreclosures spiked. Small businesses that relied on patronage of these workers went out of business. People died early from stress. Family units were broken up and people turned to drugs. But this did not matter to the self-anointed elites now congregating on the east and west coasts. They mocked the states that were decimated. Oh, it's just flyover country. They don't matter, they said. Posters depicting the irrelevance of the states located between the coasts were produced and quickly sold out. Then presidential candidate Barack Obama referred to you as bitter people who were gun and religion clingers. He would later say, as president, that only someone with a magic wand could bring back your jobs from foreign lands. Your value as a human being was marginalized. The pharmaceutical industry swooped in and with the help of long-established consulting firms such as McKinsey and Company, pushed opioids on the American people. An owner of one pharmaceutical company bribed doctors to push opioids on their patients, and doctors pushed opioids on their patients and loved the money that was flowing in. All this happened while Washington looked the other way. Flyover people did not matter, but donations from Big Pharma did to politicians on both sides of the aisle. The elites loved this arrangement they established among themselves. A uniparty developed in Washington as the two-party system became a charade to trick Americans into thinking that something was getting done on their behalf. They stuck together. This small group could control most of the population to the benefit of themselves. Population constantly living on the edge of financial ruin was easier to control. Drug addiction was icing on the cake. Organizations such as the Chamber of Commerce worked with the Uniparty to push lax border policies. Bureaucrats who preferred not to enforce existing immigration laws were hired and promoted within the federal bureaucracy. As a result, waves of illegal workers entering our country drove down wages of those new legal American residents, who in most cases came from countries in Central and South America. The elites did not care, as they looked down on hard-working Hispanics in the same way they looked down at the existing middle and working class. They just wanted cheap labor for their corporations while everyone else paid the cost of having illegal aliens stay in our country. Democrat officials thought they would have a new voting bloc to help keep them in power through total control. Just a note, legal immigration is a good thing, but illegal immigration is not. It has to be done in an orderly and legal fashion in order not to overwhelm our system and decrease the living standards of our fellow Americans, including Hispanics, blacks, Asians, and white Americans. These arrangements were further solidified during their self-inflicted 2008 fiscal crisis, which resulted in billions of your dollars being used to bail out Wall Street. Too big to fail was their shameless mantra. Now they could never fail if they became large enough, and big business and big government loved it. Meanwhile, you got artificially low interest rates on your savings account and a 30% interest rate on your credit cards. Yet their assets grew exponentially because of these fake rates. To add insult to injury, Washington sent you to die or be maimed in various wars, with the Second Iraqi War being the worst decision ever made by an American president. The revolving door among politicians, bureaucrats, and corporations spun faster and faster. Retiring generals openly and without shame took positions with defense contractors and other corporations. Were these generals bureaucratic or corporate geniuses? Is that why they were hired? Really? No. These generals brought to the table nothing more than the nerve to leverage their influence inside the Pentagon to obtain defense contracts for their new masters. Plain and simple. The hell with Dwight D. Eisenhower, they thought. Viva la military-industrial complex, I'm sure, was another thought they had. But this was not the first attempt to decimate the American family, as elites had already begun ruining many African-American families. If you get a chance, try to read up on Daniel Patrick Moynihan. Moynihan, a U.S. Senator from New York from 1977 to 2001, is likely the last deep thinker in the Democratic Party, and ironically preceded Hillary Clinton as New York Senator. While working for the Department of Labor in the Johnson administration, Moynihan was tasked with formulating policy for Johnson's war on poverty, which resulted in the Moynihan Report in 1965, a statistical study on African American poverty. Moynihan concluded that existing welfare programs had reduced the role of black men in the family, as mothers received higher welfare payments if they were not married, aka no man in the house. Among those in the African American community, this welfare policy increased both divorce rates and single mother families at the expense of the black nuclear family. Moynihan was firm in his position that a strong nuclear family provided a clear path out of poverty. Although at the time Moynihan was criticized immensely after the report was released, time has proven him to be true. Enveloping the decimation of our families is the educational system, which replaced reading, writing, and arithmetic with indoctrinating our children with far-left ideologies, attacks on God, and hate for America. During the 1950s and 60s, American high school graduates were well educated and prepared to be productive members of society. Today, we're lucky if college graduates have learned the same basic skills of high school graduates from the 50s and 60s. One of the biggest scams in recent years has been the university system, which charged exorbitant prices for college tuition but produced subpar students. The need for a college education was pushed excessively by the elites as they pushed the narrative that if you were not college educated, you were ignorant. And our ill-prepared high school graduates and their parents accepted this narrative instead of demanding that local boards of education provided a better product. Universities hired so-called academics, politicians, and bureaucrats at high salaries to teach students arcane courses, which led to additionally arcane majors. Tuitions increased dramatically, and families took out loans the size of mortgages to pay for a second-rate education. Look, I feel sorry for these people that took out these large education loans. But you have to pay them back. It was a bad decision. You have to live with that decision. This decimation of the American family and middle class was expected to continue by the elites as the 2016 presidential election drew near. Everything was on schedule. Total domination was near. It was already determined by the Uniparty that the presidential dog and pony show, aka the election, would include several candidates that worked their way through the corrupt system to become potential candidates. Hillary Clinton and Jeb Bush were the preferred. Yet it didn't matter which candidate won, as either would continue the elite's domination over you. But then came Donald Trump. Trump was the wonderful wrecking ball that we wanted. Although not perfect, we saw in Trump a person who understood what was happening to America and understood that an axe had to be taken to the institutions and ideologies that were decimating us. And he did so with courage, intellect, and toughness, three prized American values that have thread their way through our American history. How ironic it is that a billionaire New York developer with a marginally colorful past, who occasionally tweeted mean things, would get the support of a vast swath of the American people, including evangelical Christians. I can only assign this to divine providence. God placed this man in the 2016 election to give this country an opportunity to save itself. He was a Cyrus-like figure. We'll get into the 2020 election in a later episode, but I just wanted to emphasize that Trump started a movement that is much bigger than Trump. It is about you. It is about making us aware that we can have a seat at the table when controlling or dismantling the institutions that had previously hurt our lives. Additionally, he made us aware that it is not good enough to just talk about the problems of our country. We must take an active role in politics above and beyond just voting, and we cannot afford just to sit by and let bad things happen to us. Remember, you are the elite. You are smarter than they are, more industrious than they are, and believe in an almighty God. And there are more of us than them. And if we stick together, we cannot lose. Okay, let's take a 3-minute break, and I'll talk a little bit about myself. Be right back. Okay, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the intermission. Well, my name is Darren Maloney. I'm the second of 7 sons from Neil and Helen Maloney of Jersey City, New Jersey. They were married when my mother was 16 and my father was 18, and traveled the country while my father played professional baseball in the Philadelphia Phillies organization. After an injury ended his career, my father worked in a paper mill for nearly 30 years and was able to raise 7 kids on my father's income. When things were tight, he occasionally worked delivering meat in Paterson, New Jersey for a slaughterhouse. My mother raised us while my father worked. I grew up in Teaneck, New Jersey. I married a wonderful and beautiful woman, the woman of my dreams. I am a recently retired chief financial officer for one of the few AAA-rated municipalities in the state of New Jersey. Additionally, I retired as a commissioner on a joint insurance fund where I was deputy chair of the finance committee. I took an early retirement to focus on other things in my life, including this podcast. I was fortunate enough to go to some of the best colleges in the country when it meant something, as I received an athletic scholarship from a small Jesuit college in central Massachusetts, and later received a master's degree from Columbia University's School of International and Public Affairs. I worked in various bars throughout New York City to help pay for my Columbia education. It was a grind. I believe I have a unique skill to find the intersection between finance and politics, which has become all too prevalent today. Hopefully I can be helpful to you in some capacity. Part of my 30 years in municipal finance included about 20 in Hudson County, New Jersey. For those who don't know, the Hudson County Democratic Organization is pound for pound, arguably, the most corrupt local political organization in the country. It is known for its aggressive and sometimes violent, in-your-face politics. I was taught the political game by some of the most talented, corrupt elected officials and operatives as I was being groomed for a high-level position within the organization. But as they slowly brought me closer and closer into their inner circle, I realized that they were corrupt and wanted no part of them. But I took away an unending knowledge of the political game and the manipulation of the voter. I know how they cheat during elections. Now, there are a handful or two of good elected officials in Hudson, but I want to avoid naming names in hope of not putting a big fat target on their backs. Now, just a word of warning to anyone who does not like what I talk about, what I look like, or what I stand for. If you want to do something about it, be warned that I fight back. For those who don't believe me, you may be interested in taking a look at Maloney v. West New York, filed in Hudson County Superior Court around 2008-2009, where I took on the HCDO when I chose not to follow their corrupt practices, and they retaliated against me. We settled the case in the middle of jury selection, and the mayor and council soon lost their re-election bids, and their political operatives lost their jobs. Sorry, not. Okay, let's take a minute break, and then we'll talk about some current issues. Okay, welcome back. Well, our friends at the World Economic Forum are meeting right now, and they usually meet in Davos every year, Davos, Switzerland, but because of the pandemic, they decided they're not going to meet, but they're doing a series of Zoom meetings. And I love Zoom meetings in the sense that it brings us some additional information that we may not know during these closed-door sessions that they have often at the World Economic Forum. One of these Zoom meetings that a lot of people missed has been the smackdown of Christine Lagarde, who's the head of the European Union. She's the president of the European Union Bank. by Paulo Guedes, who is the Minister of Economics in Brazil. Just to note that the president of Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro, is called the Brazilian Trump. So I just want to give you a little background before I play a clip here for you. You know, and interestingly, Paulo Guedes is also a trained liberal economist. So what Guedes is going to talk about is the 30 years that globalism has affected the American worker. He refers to the Western world, but it's a synonym for the American worker. It also affected other countries too, such as Brazil. But the thing I like about this is that it is pulling down the curtains on the World Economic Forum and the policies that they pushed, these globalization policies that hurt you and me. Additionally, he's also going to make a reference to arbitrage later on. And I'll talk about this after the clip, but it's an interesting phrase that he uses when he uses the term arbitrage. Now, his English is not very good, so I hope you can pick everything up. But the final note, at the end of the clip, he gets cut off by the moderator. I think it's a CNBC talking head that cuts him off at the end because they did not like what he was talking about. And then you also hear at the end someone saying, "We're friends, we're all friends," and I'll talk about that after the clip.
And just to finalize the comment on Mr. Lagarde, I want to remember you all that for 30 or 40 years, we took advantage of the globalization. So there was an increasing discomfort in the Western world because wages couldn't go higher. There's no arbitrage anymore to be exploited by the Western side.
Minister, thank you very much for that. And I think it's interesting to see that not everybody is on the same page on this question of whether inflation will be transitory. And I thought for a moment there you were offering up an olive branch to the managing director. But as I understand it, you're still intending that the IMF closes their desk in the middle of the year. But we'll see what happens.
We love each other. We love each other.
Well, I don't think that Brazil loves you. I think that was the head of or the managing director of the IMF telling the Brazilian minister that she loves him, or we all love each other, which isn't the case. I'll get into that later. But essentially, what Guedes was saying is that, look, Lagarde was saying before that, inflation may be cured on the backs of the worker. And Guedes was just saying, no more of that. It hasn't worked for the West. So I think that's, essentially what he was pushing back on. But the interesting thing for me is that there was pushback, because a lot of these are dog and pony shows where everybody's supposed to be in agreement and say nice things about each other, which I thought was kind of unique. But the interesting thing also is, and this is what ticks me off, Guedes used the term arbitrage in relation to workers. And let me just give you a definition of arbitrage. Arbitrage is the simultaneous buying and selling of securities, currencies, or commodities in different markets in order to take advantage of differing prices for the same asset. And what really ticks me off is that these people look at you as a commodity. You are nothing more than a commodity. They could be exchanging oil, wheat, anything, and they view you as a commodity. And I don't blame Guedes for using that term. I think he was just using that term in a sense that that's how the World Economic Forum views the worker. Again, I find it offensive, and I hope you find it offensive. But let me take a step back also and talk about the IMF. The woman that you heard saying, "I love you," or "we all love each other," I think was the managing director of the IMF. I guess it was late December or mid to late 2021. IMF was asked to close their desk and leave by the Brazilian government. Now, the IMF is an organization started in, I think, 1944 with the Bretton Woods Agreement. The Bretton Woods Agreement bought us the gold-backed dollar and a number of currencies that were also pegged to the dollar, too. It also gave us the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Now, the IMF is an organization that was supposedly set up to stabilize currencies and economies. different countries that signed up. I think there were 44 countries at the time that signed up. I don't know how many are today. But the United States funds this in the billions of dollars every year. So what they do, though, is they do loan money through the World Bank. They occasionally put a lot of pressure, economic pressure, globalist pressure on these countries to follow what they say. So they'll come out every year and do a financial analysis on the world and all the countries in the world and say, this is what you should do. This is what you should do. And 9 times out of 10, it's pursuing the globalist theory. And Brazil had enough. Brazil said, we don't like your projections about Brazil. What you are projecting and what you are telling us to do is not good for Brazil. And they asked them to close their desk. I'm simplifying everything, but that's what they did. So the IMF agreed to leave. I don't think they had a choice in it. So the thing I like about it, this is pushback. This is pushback on the globalists. It came from Brazil. It came from Trump. I think it's going to continue because American worker and other workers have been hurt by globalism have had enough. So you can see at the end is that the IMF managing director was yelling, "Oh, we love each other, and I don't think that you do. Okay, so let's take a pivot to cryptocurrency. The Fed came out with a report on cryptocurrencies, and it didn't say much. Essentially, it was just punting. It's a nice thing. There's some risks involved. There's some benefits involved. One of the benefits is like, could make cross-border trading of dollars easier and more efficient. But it was basically a punt. The one thing they didn't address, too, is that whether they'll have a dollar-denominated or Fed-backed cryptocurrency. And I don't think it matters. The Fed comes out, the U.S. comes out and said, we're going to have a dollar-denominated digital asset or digital dollar. What does that do for, Bitcoin? How does that change the fact that people will want to trade and exchange in Litecoin or XRP? So I just don't know how much of an impact any U.S. digital dollar will have on the cryptocurrency. Now, crypto's getting beat up quite a bit right now. It's just it's speculative. And again, don't take any advice from me. I'm not a financial advisor. I'll just tell you what I feel. Crypto's been getting beat up, and I think that it'll continue to get beat up as long as the stock market's getting beat up right now, because it is. It's speculative. Now, I own some. For the long term, I think it'll be okay. And I think what's going to happen in the future with digital cryptocurrency is that I think what you're going to have, there'll all be little niche XRP people. There will be some people that are Litecoin people. There'll be FJB people. I just think that that's where the niche is that you want to buy a car with somebody that likes FJB coins. Knock yourself out. You'll probably have to report it, but I don't think there'll be a disintegration of crypto. There'll be some crypto that'll just fall off the map, but you'll have a ton of crypto out there, and I think that it's a popular thing with people. I think people want it. I think people want to put money into it when they see what the government is doing to the U.S. dollar. But right now, it's getting beat up, and I think. Also behind the scenes, I think what's happening is that there was always talk about whether crypto was going to be an alternate or an inflation hedge. And I think there was always a sense that there was a battle between whether crypto or gold and silver were going to be the hedge to use. And I think what we're finding out now that the hedge, the inflation hedge on this is actually gold and silver. So, again, that's my opinion. Don't take my advice. I'm not a financial advisor, but that's where I think it's going. Again, I own crypto. I like crypto in the future. And weather the storm, sit back and, I'm an investor. I'm not a trader. I always look at things down the road. Right. Okay, let's take a break. Okay. Well, I really enjoy this. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to play a clip from yesterday's Meet the Press, and they're interviewing a Biden voter, or let me say a disgruntled Biden voter. It's from yesterday, the 23rd of January. Today's the 24th of January. So let me play it, and then we'll discuss it afterwards.
Possible, but this new guy that came in the last time, you know, the Maverick, the one that was like, I'm going to do something different. He was able to get so many things done, good, bad, or ugly. He was still able to accomplish that. So are you saying that the longer you are a politician, the less you can get done?
That was a Biden supporter, folks. Welcome back. It was one of the disappointed Democratic voters we met on a trip to Georgia this week.
Well, ma'am, you are right. The longer you are a politician, the less chance you have of getting things done. So what did you expect? We have the swampiest of the swamp creatures in the White House today. And these people only care about themselves. They don't care about you. They don't care about me. They care about themselves. So you should not be surprised when they don't get anything done. And I don't want to hear about this. Oh, it's a perception thing. It's this, it's that. You look at what tops the list of Americans' concerns right now. It's the economy, it's inflation. And you're hurting everybody, Mr. Biden. Okay, let's go to another clip where they discuss recent polling. Now, just a reminder that these are their polls. They're not our polls. They're not Rasmussen polls or Trafalgar polls. These are their polls. So they are putting the best light on this. So let's go to the clip and then we'll discuss it later.
I want to put up our breakdown of the president's job approval rating because it really shows you the parts of the coalition. Everybody in the coalition's not happy. From Bernie Sanders to, I always joke, to Bernie Sanders to John Kasich, right? Like everybody in between here. With independents, his job ratings fell 25 points. With African Americans, 19, 18 to 34, 16, Latinos, 11, women, 10. And this is all basically from the first 4 months to now.
Oh, boy. One of the things I want to point out is that Biden is significantly down with African American voters and independent voters. He's down with Latino voters, but we know that. I firmly believe that a majority of Latinos will eventually be voting Republican. Biden is down 19% with African American, and I'm quite happy about that. And if you are an African American listening, leave the Democratic Party, particularly the males, because the Democratic Party has screwed you over the years. They've kicked you out of the nuclear family. Later on, they incarcerated you with unfair laws, which, by the way, Trump changed. And believe you me, leave the Democratic Party. I'm not saying go Republican. I make that choice, but leave the Democratic Party. The wrong track, right track overall is 72% of the American people say that the country's headed in the wrong track, whereas only 22% of the people are saying it's in the right track. And I'm sure a big chunk of those 22% are found in both coasts and in Washington. So it's not a good day, and it won't be a good week for Biden. Let me just pivot also to his press conference last week, which was a disaster. I found it actually disturbing. You know, I really did. I found that this man is dangerous. I think he just he increased the probability of Russia going to war with Ukraine. And I just think it's absolutely a disaster. What president predicts that Russia's going to go into Ukraine? Really, what president would predict something like that? And then he goes on and says a minor incursion may result in lesser responses from the U.S. Now, all you're doing is you're telling a guy like Putin, go ahead and do something and we'll have some kind of response. But you got to understand, Biden is a weak man. He's mentally weak, and he has a weak character. And the dangerous thing about a person like that is they will have a shrill response to prove to everybody, oh, I'm tough. And that's what concerns me about Biden and the people around him. If you look at other people around him, they're all beta males, and they're all shrill people. And they will have a shrill response to Russia. That's the reality. And Putin knows this. What happened the last time that Biden was in office with Obama? Putin took Crimea. Now, he's going to get something. Putin's not going to put 100,000 troops on the Ukrainian border and not do anything. He's going to get something. So let's take a look at what he's actually looking for. All right, really, these are four things that Putin wants. And he would never ask us if Trump was in office, or a real president was in office, or a legitimate president was in office. Russia wants a guarantee that Ukraine can never join NATO. Think of that. He's handcuffing Ukraine, or he wants Ukraine to be handcuffed, and vice versa with NATO. They'll never be able to join. Second thing, Russia wants NATO arms out of Eastern Europe. So all those satellite countries, Latvia, Poland, I think Romania, that were former Soviet satellite countries, he wants no additional NATO arms or no additional NATO support in those countries. Third thing, Russia wants a ban on NATO missiles within striking distance. Russia says it wants a ban on intermediate-range missiles in Europe, in effect reinstating a Cold War-era treaty abandoned in 2019 by the Trump administration. So there you go. Why did Putin wait? Because Biden is weak. And Russia wants autonomy for eastern Ukraine. Now, Russia says Ukraine must meet its obligations under a 2015 agreement to end the fighting between Ukraine's army and pro-Russian separatists in eastern Ukraine that have killed some 15,000 people. That peace deal, known as the Minsk Agreement, has stalled, and Ukrainians are killed practically every day. But it has allowed Russia to largely keep up the fiction it is not a party to the war in the Donbass region. Moreover, the Minsk Agreement would provide additional autonomy to the separatist Russian-speaking of Ukraine. He wants that area. Now, if it's easy for him to go into Kiev, he'll go into Kiev. But I just find it highly unlikely that he does nothing, because a guy like Putin's just not going to put 150,000 troops on the border and then walk away and say, "Oh, have a nice day." Oh, by the way, I just wanted to something that bothered me. Suddenly people have changed the name of Kiev to Kyiv. Now, I've always known it to be called Kiev, but I keep on hearing people saying, "Oh, it's Kyiv, it's Kyiv," and call me cynical, but maybe some woke bureaucrat in the State Department says, "Oh no, we think it should be called this because it's much more sensitive to call them Kyiv, to call the city Kyiv instead of Kiev." Well, chicken Kyiv tonight. That's what they want. I just think, again, that the press conference totally increased the probability that Russia goes into Ukraine. Just a bit of history on Ukraine and the Soviet Union. I just want to let you know is that the Ukraine was the punching bag for the Soviet Union early in the revolution. The kulaks of Ukraine were former peasants who had worked hard and were able to buy land for themselves and became relatively wealthy. The Soviet Union came in and essentially killed them, for lack of a better word. About 20,000 of the kulaks were killed by the Soviet Union. And what happened? It was part of collectivization of land. Now, Ukraine is very fertile. It has very fertile land. And what the Soviet Union did is they took the land and they went to battle with the kulaks who own this land. Now, the other terrible thing is, as a result of collectivization by the Soviet Union, is that they caused a famine because communists know how to take land, but they don't know how to grow wheat. They don't know how to grow anything. They don't have to raise cattle. But they're good at taking land and taking your property and anything else. But I just wanted to give you some insight into that. Now, just a heads up, you're going to hear a lot of the neocon talking heads on TV pushing for war. What I mean by war, by direct American involvement in Ukraine. Now, I'm not talking about putting some additional troops in some of the satellite countries or adding some additional weaponry to these satellite countries. I am talking these neocons, and don't put it beyond them, that they will want direct American involvement in any Russian excursions. So just be careful with that and be on the lookout for that. These neocons are dangerous people. They've got us into a ton of wars, unnecessary wars. The last unnecessary war was the second Iraqi war, which is a disgrace, and they're looking to rear their heads again. So just be on the lookout for them. The second thing I just wanted to talk about last week's press conference was Biden's comments on the election, on whether the upcoming November elections for Congress are going to be legit. Well, he put that into question. And I just find it really ironic and it's typical Democrat, because what they'll do is that I can do it, but you can't. So Trump can say that the elections are illegitimate. As Trump is going to get pounded in the press. We're going to get pounded in the press. But if I say it, it's okay. And you notice how the press really didn't say much about it. They made a couple of comments on that, and there were some clarifications, but it's dropped. And I do find that dangerous too, because quite frankly, Biden can say it, but it's just words. Trump can say it, and there are some receipts out there. Let's take a break. Just a couple of more items before we call it a day. The first item I want to cover is yesterday they had the Defeat the Mandate rally in Washington. There were about 35,000 people that showed up in a cold day to hear RFK Jr. speak. The really interesting thing about the rally is that there was a broad swath of people that showed up. There were Christians, there were Muslims, there were Jewish people that showed up. And I think that speaks a lot, and I really hope that the government is listening, because you're losing your credibility. There was a poll that was overlooked yesterday on NBC that asked people, well, who do you trust on the vaccine? And our government agencies and Anthony Fauci didn't rank so high. For example, only 40% of the people polled. Now, again, this is an NBC poll. Only 40% of the people polled trusted Anthony Fauci. Only 44% of the people polled trusted the CDC. 51% trusted the school systems, and 57% trusted their employer. Biden and Trump got low marks, both of them, but Trump's not in office. Biden is in office. Fauci is the spokesperson, and the CDC is supposedly giving us all guidance. And you're failing. The polls say you're failing. Can't blame it on anything else but yourself on this. So please listen to the people, because these numbers will only go down for you. Now, with that said, I really hope at some point we have an investigation into this whole entire policy surrounding the vaccines, surrounding any mandates, and hopefully that'll occur once the Republicans take the House in November. It's really disturbing. Now, up north in Canada, and I'm very disappointed in Canada, I understand that you've got an uber globalist up there who's eventually going to sell out your entire country, but they're off the wall in Canada. They're arresting priests, they're arresting ministers. It's just shameful what they're doing up there. So the truckers had enough of it. Right now, there is a convoy of trucks headed toward Ottawa, which is the Canadian capital. Now, I'm getting reports anywhere from hundreds to thousands of trucks are going to converge on Ottawa so that truckers can voice their opinion. Now, it just so happens that the Canadian government is placing vaccine mandates on their truckers. Now, in Canada, if you go to the U.S. and then come back, you have to quarantine for 14 days. And that's a very good way to put a trucker out of business. You think a trucker's going to make any money if he's got to quarantine for 14 days? I don't think so. On the U.S. side, the U.S. is requiring that Canadian truckers be double vaccinated or they won't be allowed in. That's just putting truckers out of business. And you think you have a supply chain problem now? What happens if the truckers just decide, I am not going to work? I'm going to take 6 months off until this thing goes away. Now, it's much easier to do in Canada because I think they have more of a social safety net to do. But truckers in Canada affect the U.S. economy. So, again, it's going to be interesting to see. They're supposed to converge on Ottawa, I think on the 26th or 27th. And it should be interesting to see what happens. Government has to listen. Even Scott Gottlieb, the former administrator at the FDA, said yesterday in one of the talking shows that the government's got to be more flexible on this. You're just going to lose the credibility from the people. I think you have to do something about that. Either whether it's up north or whether it's here, because you are losing the people. Okay, let's take a look at stocks today. Stocks finished up slightly up, and this is after a 1,000-point drop in the Dow. And it's a volatile market, and it's going to continue to be a volatile market. But I blame the Fed, and I blame Biden for this. The Fed since 2008 have kept interest rates artificially low, which has pumped up the stock market, everything the same. Then you've had Biden come along and tossed so much money into the economy over the past, since he's been in office. And it's just a combination. Here's the way I look at it, is that since 2008, you've got these hot coals that have been created by artificially low rates and quantitative easing. And now you've got Biden come along and just tossed so much money into the economy. And it's just caused inflation. And it's forced the Fed to raise interest rates. Now, remember months ago, they were saying, it's just transitory. It's just transitory. Well, it's not. They're going to have to raise interest rates. We have a slowing economy, and we're likely in a stagflation environment. I can't see anything good that will help the stock market this year. I just don't see anything. And if you do, I think you're fooling yourself. Now, what can happen? Well, the Fed can raise rates, which is what they're going to do, and that's not good for the market. The economy can slow. That's not good for the market. Or both. That's not good for the market. And I don't think the Fed's going to come and bail out the market again. Now, we have to take this pain. We have to get back to normal. Now, if you take a look at the price-to-earning ratios, they're just so high. Stocks are so expensive. Let's use the indexes. The S&P, the Dow, and the NASDAQ. They're so expensive compared to what their average price-to-earnings ratio are. And we've got to get back to normal. The Dow this year is down 5.4% year-to-date. S&P is down 7.47% year-to-date. And the NASDAQ is down 11.44%. And I think there's more pain to come. I really do. I think that we'll see some pain this week. We'll take a look at the calendar in a minute, and we'll see what happens. I mean, best that the market can hope for is just temporarily tread water with earnings coming out. Now, it's a big week for earnings. I think Microsoft and Amex, Tesla, Boeing, Apple, Samsung, they're all coming out with earnings this week. And look, if they hit the target, it may allow them to tread water. But if they're off and they're giving guidance on future earnings, look, market's going to get beat up again. Again, I think it's healthy. I think it's very healthy that we get back to normal. Let's take a look at the economic calendar. All right, let's see. Well, today's Monday. That's passed. Let's see. Take a look at Tuesday, January 25th. We've got the consumer confidence report coming out, and if there's any surprises on this, it's definitely going to hurt the market. The expectation is going to be at 112. Then on Wednesday, January 26th, we've got the FOMC report statement, and the Fed Chair Jerome Powell will have his news conference. So it's he'll come out and just, if he has any guts, he'll continue to say that I am going to recommend raising rates. We should have 3, 4, 5, 6 rates. I think he's projecting 4, but there are people out there that think there's going to be 6 or 7 rate hikes this year. But he's got to stay the course. He's got to let the market know that higher rates are coming. Let's see, on Thursday, we've got initial jobless claims. That's the unemployment numbers from the states. To me, more importantly, is the continuing jobless claims, to see those people that are constantly on unemployment. That's not good. We've got the durable good orders coming in on Thursday, capital equipment orders, pending home sales, GDP. On Friday, we've got personal consumption expenditures, which the Fed uses quite a bit for gauging inflation. Personal income. We've got the Michigan's consumer sentiment report coming out. People expecting 68.4. So there's a lot this week that can move the market. I'm more interested in the end of the week to see what happens. An indicator for me, what I like to watch, to see if people like to stay long in the market over the weekend, particularly with so much going on in Russia. So we shall see. Okay, I want to thank everybody for listening to my inaugural podcast. And let me give you my email address. It's darrenm3225@gmail.com. If you want to send me anything, if you have any suggestions of what you would like me to talk about, or if you would like to call in, just email me. I will get back to you. And again, thank you again so much for listening to me. I like to do 2 podcasts a week, one like Tuesdays and another one on Fridays or Saturdays. So I like to do 2 a week. This is my first one, and thank you for listening. See you soon.